my sort of opening remark always on conversations like this is, I look at the Sustainable Development Goals and see that they're going to cost trillions to solve, and kind of the global charity sector deals in billions. And so I'm always keen to hear and understand how regulators and people that are influential in the charity and non-profit space think about how new technology will bring us closer to solving some of the perennial problems that keep people like us awake at night. So, I mean, very quickly, if I can start with sort of a general question, how in your roles at the Charity Commission, and how is the Commission more generally approaching new and emerging technologies like AI, and how do you see them impacting the charities that you regulate?
Thanks, James. So I think one of the risks for any regulator is that we look at specific guidance and that we over-regulate in some of these spaces. So one of the things we prefer to do in instances like this, where something new is emerging, whether it's technology or whether it's something else, is to look at our existing guidance and see, is there guidance that can apply to the decision making and to the role of trustees? And I think what we're seeing in the AI space and the technology space is our decision-making guidance for trustees is already pretty clear on the types of issues they should consider, how they should look at risk, how they should look at opportunity, how they should balance their fiduciary duties against that. And first and foremost, it's how does it further their charitable purpose? So one of the things we don't want to do is over-regulate or confuse our regulation by producing specific guidance. So what we do in this space is we're monitoring, we're engaging with the sector, and we're looking at how the sector is using and adapting to AI at the moment.
Makes a lot of sense. And I wonder if there are some specific examples. I mean, what kind of things are you hearing from charities? In my role as a grant maker, I'm hearing a lot of opportunity, but also a lot of worry, particularly around roles where there's fear that perhaps AI could replace them, thinking kind of writing funding bids, reviewing funding bids, etc. So I wonder what kind of things you're hearing directly from your constituents.
So I think we're hearing a number of things. And I think the first thing to say is charities have always been innovators. They've always innovated. Often they're at the forefront of societal innovation and have driven wider change across society. So innovation is nothing new to charities, and they're really good at it. I think the key thing, and some of the examples we've seen, is how does it further their charitable purpose? What is it that AI or that the technology can do to enable the charity to better deliver for its beneficiaries and its charitable purpose? And we have seen some real examples. So you've got with the British Heart Foundation, how it's used machine learning to look at how and identifying risk factors in the development of a heart attack. So it's used machine learning to identify other atypical features that would mean people would go on to develop a heart attack, such as inflammation and scarring in fatty tissues. So they're using it in a real world sense to improve and further their charitable purpose.
Yeah, and I love examples like that. And obviously in my foundation role, we're doing a lot of work globally, particularly in the global south, where healthcare challenges are often more pronounced. We're seeing a lot of really, really good uses of AI to predict things like blindness and things like on-chain interventions to ensure against the risk of something happen rather than something actually happening. So what we refer to as anticipatory action. So I share your enthusiasm and excitement. I suppose one of the things that emerges from a question like that is obviously, most of the innovation there is happening in the big charities that have got the sort of time and headspace to innovate. I wonder, is there any action you're taking to sort of ensure that smaller charities aren't left behind, sort of perhaps as the larger organisations are able to benefit from the time, space and budget to innovate?
It's a really good question, and one of the things we try to do is we try to highlight some of these examples. So there was a recent blog we produced on AI in the sector, both highlighting some of these examples where we know charities have used AI and given specific examples. We also are part of some of the conversations with some of the sector bodies So Digital Skills Code and other conveners of the sector, we're a supporter of that and have been for many years. So this is where the sector work together, they collaborate, they work with each other, and they share their learning between themselves. And I think that's really important. Often as a regulator, we can get in the way. So one of the real important things is that we do highlight and we do support the sector bodies that enable this learning, this sharing, and this collaboration across different charities.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And as a sort of a vociferous reader of everything you put out, I agree. I think lots of the content recently has been excellent and certainly supportive of the direction that the sector's moving in. I suppose a question kind of for you specifically, as we know, technology is becoming a bigger part of how charities fundraise and how charities sort of measure impact and report and ultimately build public trust. How do you see the Commission's role evolving in that space?
It's really interesting. So I think one of the things that we have a real role in is being the guardian of the public's trust and confidence. So always at the forefront for us is our role in ensuring the public interest is protected. Charities rely on the public's trust and rely on that for the willingness of the public to give and support charities. So that's one of the areas we really focus on, and that's why in this space, one of the things we want to ensure is charities are transparent. So there are real benefits here, but there are risks. So one of the key things for charities is around transparency around their use of AI. It is around informed consent. If you are using beneficiaries' data, if you are using donors' data, is that clear? Is that transparent? Do you have the agreement and the permission of your donors, of your beneficiaries? So one of the real important things I think for charities is to make sure that they're really clear about their use of this technology, how it benefits their beneficiaries, how it benefits the delivery of their charity purpose, and that they engage and communicate that with their beneficiaries, their donors, and the public.
Great answer. Yeah, I fully agree. Makes a lot of sense. And in terms of how the Commission itself is using new technology, are there examples sort of practical application in obviously we know there have been changes to the website recently and how charities upload data. Is there anything specific that you want to highlight in that space?
Yeah, so as a regulator, we've always ourselves been an early adopter
Mhm.
of technology. So one of the things and one of the areas we have used it in is some of our permissions work. So where we know and we have prescriptive data collection as part of an application to do something, we now have machine learning behind that. So whilst humans will still take the decision in a lot of cases, what the machine learning will do is it will gather all of that data in an easily readable format for our caseworkers and our experts. It will present it to them in a way where it will highlight both risks or where it's met our guidance, and it will enable faster decision making. So some of the ways we're using it is to deal with areas where we know it's time consuming, it is administrative. We do know by collecting metadata in a set format, it can do some of that work for our experts.
Yeah, awesome. And yeah, incredibly useful to hear, especially because we work in an environment where there are, as you know, an awful lot of charities, and it's good to hear that there are efficiencies being built in because there's a lot of admin associated with that. So, good answer, thank you. I suppose one other question I was just thinking as I was mulling over this conversation was in terms of perhaps previous, more recent tech shift. So the move kind of from more analog fundraising to digital fundraising, the move kind of physical storage to cloud storage. Are any of the sort of the lessons from some of the past tech shifts informing your decision on the AI piece?
So I think in this space, one of the things we have learned is to first understand as a regulator how charities are using the
Yeah,
technology. What are the opportunities? Understand from the charities themselves where they see the risks, they see the opportunities, and it really is working alongside charities to understand that. And that informs our position then as a regulator as to where we see risks, where we see opportunities, and how we can both enable but also safeguard that really important public trust and confidence to the sector. So it's often a tricky balance because, as we've seen in some of this emerging technology, if you regulate too early, you can kill off some of the innovation. If you regulate too late, you get some of the ethical issues appearing. So it is a really tricky balance, and I don't think we're the only regulator who is learning in this space still.
No, agreed. And I suppose then that leads into a slightly sort of broad question. Just in general, sort of, I mean, the charity sector, obviously in England and Wales that you regulate, but the broader charity sector sort of globally, in your opinion, how equipped do you think the sector is to deal with this change? Do you, I mean, on, I suppose in the crypto world, we generally operate in bullish or bearish sort of terms. But are you relatively confident? Are you bullish on the fact that charities will be able to embrace and move with this new technology quickly, or do you see it as more of a risk?
So I think what we need to remember is that the sector has always innovated, is
Yeah.
always innovating. We know from some of the recent surveys in the Digital Skills Code, 35% of charities are already using AI in some way, shape, or form. So they've already shown that they are early adopters, they are early testers of some of these innovative technologies as they come along. So I do think what we are seeing here is the opportunities are being grabbed by charities, but also charities are really good at bringing to the forefront in society some of the ethical considerations. So again, we're also seeing charities have those debates with themselves, with the public, with their donors and beneficiaries around the ethical use and adoption of technology and what that means.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And one of the things as sort of the GSR Foundation funds, not exclusively, but largely around kind of blockchain centric innovation. The firm that sort of established us and we now operate independently of, but we're still very close to, is GSR, which is a UK based cryptocurrency market maker. We're looking at sort of innovation on chain and areas where sort of blockchain can do things smarter and faster than traditional aid modalities. Emergent areas, perhaps won't surprise you, are around cash transfer and stablecoin deployment. You know, we know remittances are a huge sort of source of wealth for sort of foreign economies. And so we're looking at how the blockchain can be used to sort of do things smarter and cheaper and faster. I suppose with blockchain and the rise of charities looking at cryptocurrency specifically as fundraising vehicles and vehicles for delivering good, I wonder if you've come across either any examples of good practice in that space or any examples that are more cautionary tales. I'm conscious that sort of uptake is slow because rightly so, charities have to consider risk, and historically there has been risk in crypto. There have been bad actors and all the stuff that's made the headlines. But I wonder if you've got sort of any comments or thoughts on sort of how crypto and blockchain is emerging into the charity sector.
So I think it's a really interesting question. I think charities have a different role to play than for-profit businesses. A lot of charity money, you know, is funds that come from the British public, funds that come from people who donate, and therefore the responsibility, the trust and confidence, and therefore the risk appetite is different to a for-profit company. But as we've said, charities already innovate. There are opportunities there. We know, for example, in a lot of the international spaces where charities operate, often it is in fragile states. It is in states where perhaps there isn't the infrastructure that we have here in the UK, the regulation, the banking system, you know, the independent oversight. So we know in those types of spaces, there is an opportunity there for the types of this technology to enable charities to reach further, to do more in some of those states, and perhaps in a safer way than more traditional methods. So we know there is opportunity there, but as you rightly point out, there is risk. And so it's really important that trustees do go through that process in their decision making of balancing the opportunity with the risk and being really clear What is it they're trying to achieve? How will the adoption of this technology enable them to do that? And how do they mitigate the risks as far as possible? You can't mitigate every risk and you can't mitigate everything 100%, but how do you do it as far as possible?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense, and we're seeing some really good examples of people take risk and profit from it and do well. So keen to hear and pleased to hear that's the Commission's sort of position on that too. In terms of sort of, I suppose the new, I mean, my background historically is always in fundraising and particularly kind of relationship type fundraising, and we're looking now at people who've made money, and companies that have made money in new industries and different industries, perhaps typically. And my interest is always in sort of understanding donor motivations and how donor motivations sort of might evolve. I wonder sort of if you have a comment on what firms like ours and other firms kind of in the tech space or in nascent new technology spaces should be doing with regards kind of supporting the charity sector, ensuring that, yes, all right, it's important to make a profit, but also recognizing that we also have a social purpose too as a business. Have you got good examples, or do you have a comment on sort of what companies in this space should be doing to help?
So I think there are good examples, and I won't name the technology companies, but I'm aware of at least three who do engage heavily with the sector. And it's really great to see because charities have a lot to offer. They have a lot of insight. They know their beneficiaries. They know the communities they serve. So it's really a two-way street. And some of the partnerships in this space can deliver, real magic for the beneficiaries and for the communities that charities serve. So one of the things I definitely encourage is for businesses in this space to reach out to charities, to think about how can they work with charities, how can they partner, how can they support. And it isn't just about cash, it is about the expertise. It's about the time that the people who have the expertise within those businesses can give to charitable organisations to support them and their cause. And it really will be a two-way street. The organisation will benefit and the charity will benefit.
Could not agree more. And that's very much the ethos we take, as we try and give more than just money. We're very intentional in our language. We don't use sort of grantee or recipient or beneficiary. We use partner. The people we fund are partners on this journey with us, and we very much share that view. So then, just to, before we wrap up, be fascinated, and this is sort of slightly indulgent question on my behalf because I'm interested in your view, but be interested to hear sort of over the next, let's say, 3 years, what are you most excited about sort of for the UK charity, sorry, the England and Wales charity sector, which then we can extrapolate to the global charity sector, and what do you perceive as the biggest risk?
It's a really interesting question. So I'm a big believer that in challenge comes opportunity, and the greatest opportunities come from the greatest challenge. I think as we're seeing some of the risks globally emerge, we know the geopolitical situation is very different from the post-war settlement. We're seeing an upheaval in the traditional geopolitical settlement. We've got environmental changes that are here. They're not just on the horizon, they are happening. But with that comes real opportunity to reimagine, to rethink, to re-engage. And the sector's shown over the centuries that it is absolutely brilliant at rising to these challenges, at innovating, at finding ways to adapt, and helping society find new ways of dealing with these challenges as they emerge. And I honestly think the sector today is better than the sector of the past. It's not just equal to, it's better. It's learned, it's adapted. And I honestly think the sector will rise to these challenges. It will seize these opportunities. And we're already seeing that in the AI space.
Yeah, I completely agree. And as I've disclosed that I'm a fundraiser, I share that relentless optimism. I've seen the sector be resilient in so many ways and innovate, right out of left field and survive very, very challenging times. And we're in a poly crisis now, as lots of international funders refer to it, but we've always been in one. Like, it's
Yeah.
always been a challenging space. It's always been, when I moved into crypto, people warned me that there was volatility and change, and I was like, but that's the sector I'm from. The charity sector is volatile and changes a
Yeah.
lot, but is always resilient and always kind of makes it through. And then I suppose not wanting to end on a negative, but if you were to sort of outline what you think the risks are over the next 3 years, where would you go there?
So I think in terms of the risks, and we've just published for the first time an annual sector risk assessment that's designed to support trustees with their thinking. It's designed to give a sectoral view to charities so they can think more widely and they can look ahead. I think the risks that we're seeing are financial. So we know there is global financial challenges at the moment, and that won't go away. But with that comes the opportunity for charities. How can they rethink how they're delivering? How can they rethink collaboration, partnership? What are the opportunities in that space for them? I think what we are seeing as well is a polarization in society. And I think, again, the opportunity there for charities is their ability to connect. Charities have one of the most amazing qualities of charities is their ability to connect different people, different communities, and to build those connections. And so at a time when we are seeing society polarize, we are seeing views polarize, we're seeing society forget how to debate, how to disagree without agreeing in that way. Charities have a real opportunity in that space to help people connect, to help people debate, to help people discuss and understand different viewpoints, if not agree with each other, but understand different viewpoints. So a real risk, but actually a real opportunity for charities. And then I think that the third area for charities is I've already said charities have got a long history of innovating, of adapting, and we've seen that over the centuries. One of the risks we have is this pace of change and the pace of demand on the sector reduces the ability of the sector to think how it needs to adapt, to thoughtfully follow an evidence-based approach on what's good about the current charity model that we absolutely want to keep, but actually how do we evolve, how do we adapt the charity model in England and Wales and globally. And I think people call some of the model, and I've heard this, and it drives me crazy in the sector. We've got a Victorian model, and it's no, we haven't. Charities have evolved and adapted. We didn't have charitable incorporated organizations 40 years ago. We've got them. Charities have evolved and adapted over centuries, and they will continue to do so. But let's not forget that there's a lot about the current charity model that is successful, that has worked. We have one of the biggest, most impactful charity sectors in the world, and that hasn't happened by accident. It's happened because charities are brilliant at adapting and evolving, and they need to remember that and not just focus on the negative.
Could not agree more. And there's a rallying cry if ever I heard one. I think, one of the things we're seeing is that with this innovation piece and the pace with which things are developing, that's where I see the risk, because obviously, the next iteration of GPT is going to be exponentially better than the current. And so it's very difficult to write policies in an environment that's moving as quickly as this one is. And so what we're trying to do as a foundation is, where we can afford to take risk in innovation, we're doing that. So with the technology we understand around crypto and blockchain modalities, we're funding charities to test stuff, and then when things work, we publish. And when things don't work, we also publish. We're certainly not presenting this as the be all and end all. We're presenting it as a slightly different way to do things, and we want to make sure that access to that sort of technology and those opportunities is equitable, which is where I think the risk potentially is for us. I have
Absolutely.
enjoyed this conversation enormously. I'm a huge fan of your work. I will go on record and say that I think the Charity Commission does fabulous work and contributes to a very, very buoyant and active sector in the UK. And I'm deeply appreciative for your time. If you've got any last remarks, feel free to make them.
No, that's great to hear. And I'm really lucky that we've got great people in the Commission. And like the sector, the people who work here work here because they want to make a difference and they believe in what charity can do for society and the difference it can make, not just for our country, but also globally. And so for me, it's a real privilege to be able to have these conversations and to be able to do my small part with the team we've got here to enable charities to achieve the amazing things they do.
Well, it's hugely appreciated.
That's great. Thanks, James. Really good to meet you.
Great to meet you too. Thanks for your
Cheers,
time.
James. Thanks so much.
Cheers,
Thanks a
Ben.
lot.
Thanks a
Bye.
lot. Bye bye.
Cheers. Bye.